Hello YouTube, Proxy here, and today's video is all about world bosses. Yes, there will be epic raid bosses for Ashes of Creation's player base to deal with and obtain epic loot from. But as always, before we begin, we need a generic disclaimer that the game is still in pre-alpha and some of the topics discussed in this video are subject to change. And while some of this information is from official sources, not everything from this video has been officially announced, and may change over time. Opinions stated in my videos are content of my own and do not represent Intrepid's viewpoint or outlook. So I'm going to be doing this video slightly differently from what I do in my previous videos. And I'm first going to talk about what we know so far about world bosses that has been confirmed or mentioned by the developers. And the second part will be things that we don't know quite yet about world bosses. We will begin by talking about how world bosses will come to exist. Unlike other MMORPGs where world bosses just magically appear for no reason, or will just be casually walking around an area, world bosses in Ashes will be reactive to the node system. An example of this is provided by Intrepid's Nodes Part 1 official video.
However, all of this activity has triggered something deep within the mountain. All of this civilization has awoken an ancient dragon. The higher stage a node advances, the more significant events it draws toward it. Epic world bosses will reflect the development of specific nodes and their location. Our world is designed to react to the players by providing new and exciting chapters to an ever-evolving story. A story that reflects the actions of each server. A story that can change and adapt to provide the players an immersive tale woven by the actions of the community. This dragon is the server's dragon, part of the server's tale, and one which might not be seen on any other server. The players now must react to this evolving threat. Thankfully, these players are up to the task, and taking down this dragon has again contributed to the node, furthering its development.
So this basically means as nodes advance and the activity of players rise, they have a chance to trigger a world boss appearance. It was also mentioned on Discord that players could stumble upon such world bosses while exploring and accidentally trigger them as well. I do quite like this approach personally, as it improves on the other MMORPGs that simply have world bosses spawn in the world and merely reappear at a designated time. This is definitely one of the aspects where Ashes has improved on what other MMORPGs currently offer. Okay, so the world boss has appeared. Now what? Well, at first, nothing. The world boss will just quite happily sit there, and if the community is informed about it, adventurers can go and kill it. However, if it is left alone, it will start marching towards the node that caused it to be activated, and it will attempt to disable various features of the node. We originally thought that world bosses could delevel nodes. However, Stephen Sheriff from Intrepid has informed me that node deleveling and destruction will only occur exclusively through sieges now. Okay, so now the world boss has begun stampeding its way towards a node. Players within the community are free to engage it and put an end to its life before it can reach the node. And even if it does reach the node, the citizens can try and defeat it there also. Considering collateral damage could occur from fighting the world boss at your own node, it suggests it's better to deal with this world boss before it can reach this point, as fighting the world boss within the node could cause some serious damage and disable various features of the node. It's important to mention that while people will try to defeat these world bosses before reaching civilization, nodes that are trying to compete with growth currently could attack the players trying to slay the world boss, in an attempt to sabotage the node's growth. It's unsure if this feature would remain in-game, but if it does, it would really add a new aspect to open world PvP and diplomacy. We also know that not all world bosses will try to attack the nodes. Some will have an alternative effect on the region until defeated. This will be things like plunging the region into an eternal winter or drought until it has been slain. Perhaps they could even take things further and allow nodes to offer sacrifices to these powerful beings, if they are unable to beat them. It would be quite cool to sacrifice 1,000 sheep to a world boss in order to get some rain going, to water those dehydrated crops. Well, at least until people are strong enough to take down such a world boss at least. Okay, so we know how world bosses will spawn, how they will generally work, and the effect they will have on nodes if are left alone or are not killed. So now let's talk about how unique these world bosses will be. Most MMORPGs let you have access to all the world bosses. In this sense, most games never give you a restriction on what world bosses you might see or fight. In Ashes, however, there is some uniqueness to what world bosses you will actually see. And once again, this links back to the node system. Some nodes will evolve and grow, while others don't. And you will only ever see world bosses from nodes that grow. If a node during its entire lifespan of Ashes never grew bigger than a village, that particular server would never see the world boss assigned to it. In a way, this is nice knowing that during your entire lifetime of playing this game, there are things that you have still yet to see, and things that only certain servers will ever get to see. And this is extremely apparent on the subject of world bosses, and in fact for those guilds specifically that like to get those world first boss kills, will have a really long-term goal in order to try and fight and kill every single one of those bosses on a particular server, because every single node would have to be maxed out progression-wise for these raid bosses to be accessible, and given that not every node at one time can be maxed out, would require a lot of PvP and siege-based content to even get access to half these world bosses. We also know that the world bosses will drop materials required to craft some of the higher tier weapons and gear, and if those bosses are unique to the server, this means there will also be gear that can only be crafted on this server. This is quite interesting for me as a YouTuber, because this means to some degree that information and guides will need to have some kind of server specificness in mind, as a guide to make an epic sword would be useless on a server where the world boss and its materials simply did not exist. So now we know that some of the world bosses on your server will be unique and dependent on which nodes are evolved, and we also know that world bosses will drop items for crafting. But what else do we know about world bosses? Well, we have this screenshot of a world boss being designed quite a few months ago, and you'll notice inside this screenshot is a tiny humanoid creature, and this represents the player's size to give you an idea of what the scale of the world boss will be. And as you can see, the world bosses will be truly worldly in size. And the crazy thing about this particular world boss is that it's not even fully shown in the picture. During the fight it will pull itself out of the ground and be even bigger, and possibly start marching its way towards a node to disable various features of it. This kind of suggests that it's one of those mechanics that's best dealt with sooner rather than later. So yeah, world bosses are going to be truly massive in size, and really living up to the name of being a world boss. Also, as a side note, we know that some of the world bosses will have a chance to drop mounts, some of which will have a time limit of 30 days on them. This also includes an extremely rare dragon egg, which will allow a player who isn't even a mayor or a king or queen to have a 30-day period in which they can use an extremely exclusive dragon mount. And this is the only type of mount currently which can fly, and only a few players will ever get to use it. Well, that's the majority of things that we know so far about world bosses. But what don't we know about them currently? Well, we don't know how the loot system will work. Whether it will be raid-based looting, the kind of world bosses where people just get things for showing up, or if the looting will be based on a contribution meter of some kind. While that we do know that the communities will work together to kill these things, we don't know if guilds will bother to fight over them. We also don't know if the world boss area is considered a PvP zone, or if you will gain huge amounts of corruption if you try to prevent one being killed. I guess it will be possible for guild wars to be declared on various guilds present at the world boss, but it's unsure yet if that's even worthwhile to do so. These are generally balanced questions, and we most likely won't know until the game has had some testing done during alpha. We also don't know how the world bosses will act during a fight, and while we do know that they are developing some kind of AI system for NPC based combat, we don't really know how these world bosses will act mechanically. What I mean by this is that we don't know if the world bosses will be a scripted fight, like you could expect from World of Warcraft for example, or something that has more reactive phases such as Dark Souls games, or even if the bosses are just simply tank and spank. We also don't know if these world bosses will have attack indicators, if the fights will be choreographed, or if we have to learn the fights from various animations the bosses will perform. Overall, the world boss system seems fairly interesting, and is definitely attempting to take things up a notch from what we expect from other MMORPGs. And this is one of the aspects of the game that I'm personally interested in, and I'm really hoping there will be a PvPvE aspect to it. There will already be instance dungeons and raid bosses that are for purely PvE players, so it would be nice to have a more PvX style of content for world bosses in my opinion. So there is quite a lot of stuff that we already know about world bosses, but there is still quite a lot of things that we don't know, and I for one am excited to find out more about them. Well guys, that completes my what we know so far about world bosses. Remember guys, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like, subscribe and leave a comment below. And as always guys, thanks for watching.